Okay, welcome to the deep dive. You've given us a stack of really focused sources, taking us deep into the Battle of Cambrai in November 1917.
Yeah, that's right.
We're not zooming out to the massive scope of the whole thing, but really zeroing in, shifting our focus right into the intense, really bloody fight for a specific objective. Bourlon Wood and the village right next to it.
Exactly. The material you've shared gives us this incredibly detailed, almost minute-by-minute look at specific days, specific actions during this crucial phase of the battle.
Mhm.
It really moves beyond just the headlines of that initial tank success, and gets into the grinding reality on the ground as the British tried to, capitalize on that breakthrough.
Right, exactly. So our mission today, and we're guided only by the information of these sources you sent, is to unpack the specific challenges, the key events, and yeah, the often surprising, really brutal details of trying to take this notoriously difficult objective.
Yep.
We really want to help you understand the granular experience of the fighting and, crucially, why it was just so incredibly costly.
So if we connect this to the initial context, just briefly, Cambrai kicks off with that almost, revolutionary success for the British, November 20th, using tanks to breach the Hindenburg Line.
Which was huge.
Massive. But as the advance pushed deeper, the objective shifted. Bourlon Wood and Village, sitting up there on a ridge, became this absolutely essential yet incredibly difficult goal after that initial sort of stunning push.
And you can tell how vital command thought it was just based on the sheer, repeated, and incredibly costly British efforts to capture it. That's all laid out in these sources.
Right. Yeah.
It just became the next big hill to take, didn't it? The sort of linchpin for sustaining the advance, the obstacle that absolutely had to be cleared.
And what's fascinating here, and tragic too, is how quickly that initial advantage, that element of surprise, just dissolves. It turns into something far more attritional. Let's look at the first major assaults focused on Bourlon. This is November 23rd, 1917.
Okay, let's unpack this based on your material.
Mhm.
So the sources tell us the 40th Division got this incredibly tough job,
Mm-hmm.
specifically assigning the 119th and 121st Brigades to the task.
That's it. The 119th Brigade was aimed at Bourlon Wood itself. We see battalions like the 19th Royal Welch Fusiliers, the 12th South Wales Borderers involved.
Oui?
They had some tank support early on initially from D Battalion, that's a tank core unit, with more from G Battalion joining later after they sorted out refueling problems.
Right, and this is where the sources really highlight a fundamental challenge, isn't it? Something
Yeah.
we see again and again when new tech arrives in war.
Yeah.
They note this specific problem. The tank commanders hadn't actually seen the wood before the attack.
Right, unfamiliar ground.
And, maybe even more importantly, the infantry had never worked with tanks. Ever.
Yeah, that lack of joint training, it's not just a footnote.
No. It speaks volumes about the complex human side, the organizational challenge of actually using new tools effectively
Mm-hmm.
with your old tactics. So, what specific problems did this cause, this lack of training, according to the reports?
Well, the sources strongly imply it led to a real lack of seamless coordination. The attack timeline is precise. Artillery starts pounding the wood's edge at 10:10 a.m.,
Okay.
lifts at 10:30, and that's when the tanks and infantry were supposed to advance together. In theory, tanks crush the wire, knock out machine guns, infantry falls right behind. Simple.
Sounds good on paper.
Yeah.
But in the wood itself, the sources say the 19th Royal Welch Fusiliers actually made decent progress, though it was hard fought.
Mm-hmm.
Got about halfway through, reached the northeastern edge by early afternoon. But the 12th South Wales Borderers, they had a much tougher time on the western side. Heavier resistance and, well, correspondingly heavy casualties.
Yeah, it sounds like the terrain itself, the dense wood probably broke up formations
Definitely.
and just made that already difficult tank-infantry link-up even harder.
Exactly. And the Germans weren't just sitting there, were they?
Not at all. They launched determined counterattacks. One counterattack around 3 p.m. is described in the sources as threatening to sweep away all before it.
Wow. Sounds serious.
It was. Fortunately, the 18th Welch Regiment arrived just in time, launched a crucial charge that managed to beat the Germans back.
But it came at a cost.
A heavy one. The sources specifically mention Lieutenant Colonel William Kennedy was killed leading that very charge. He's commemorated on the Louverval Memorial.
So by nightfall on the 23rd, after all that fighting,
Only the northern edge of the wood was still in German hands. A really brutal day for, pretty limited gains inside the wood itself.
and at the same time, the other brigade, the 121st, was attacking Bourlon village. just to the left of the wood.
That's right. Battalions like the 20th Middlesex, 13th Green Howards, involved in this incredibly difficult task.
And the sources highlight immediate difficulties there too, right?
Starkly, yeah. They were shelled from the very first moment they started advancing and exposed to devastating flanking fire.
From where?
From parts of the Hindenburg Line the Germans still held, that massive defensive system the British had broken through initially, but it could still bite them from the sides.
Ouch. Yeah.
And the tanks. 7 of the 13D battalion tanks supporting this attack actually made it into the village, according to the reports. But they met absolutely fierce resistance. The sources make it crystal clear. The Germans had recovered from that initial shock of Cambrai's tank attack. They were not going to be easily pushed out of Bourlon village. They were ready, dug in.
And this is a significant point from the sources, isn't it? How quickly the German defense adapted, right across the board.
Absolutely. Reserves were being rushed to the sector. Even Richthofen's group, the Flying Circus, was deployed to the front.
The Red Barons unit.
That's the one, starting to impact British air operations, really hampering the Royal Flying Corps, and adding to the British problems, the tank crews themselves. I mean, after days of intense fighting, they were just utterly exhausted.
Physically and mentally drained, you'd imagine.
Completely. And then, just to add another layer of misery to the whole thing,
What?
the sources note it began to snow.
Oh, perfect.
It is.
Just what you need. Mud, shells, machine guns, and now snow.
Exactly. I can only imagine the conditions. Awful.
So that first day, November 23rd, was just a brutal fight. Limited gains, tough terrain, coordination issues, determined Germans.
Yep.
Which leads us straight into the next 24 hours, right?
Yeah.
November 23rd into the 24th. A period marked by, well, confusion and ultimately terrible sacrifice.
Yeah. A fresh push was planned for the 24th. The Guards Division was brought in to replace the absolutely exhausted 51st Division.
Right, fresh troops.
And cavalry units were dismounted, ready to support the planned assault on Bourlon village.
Okay, so what was the plan?
Well, the attack was initially timed for midday, 12.0 hours. It was planned to have just 12 tanks supporting the 121st Brigade, who were still sort of holding positions near the village.
Only 12 tanks. Seems a bit light after the first day's experience.
It does, and maybe command thought so too, because the sources detail these significant planning delays. First, the attack got pushed back to 3.0 p.m. 15 BROP hours.
Yeah.
And then, crucially, it was called off entirely. Canceled. Why? Because 12 tanks just weren't considered enough for the job.
Right, okay. Sensible decision, perhaps?
Yeah.
But there's a catch, isn't there?
A terrible one. This raises that huge question about communication. The fog of war. Something these sources just tragically illustrate. The outcome, according to these reports, is that the orders canceling the attack never reached the troops at the front line.
Oh, no. You read that and just the weight of it. It's gut-wrenching.
It really is. So at 3:00 p.m., 15:0 hours, the 121st Brigade and their 12 tanks, they advanced anyway, completely unaware the attack had been canceled hours before.
Unbelievable. So they go in.
Yeah. The sources describe the tanks getting into the village, doing their job, engaging machine guns as planned. But the infantry, the 14th Highland Light Infantry is mentioned specifically here. They were just too far behind, couldn't keep up.
So the tanks are isolated.
Exactly. With no infantry keeping pace to secure the ground they took, the tanks eventually had no choice but to withdraw. Couldn't hold it alone.
And the Highland Light Infantry, the HLI.
Well, they did eventually manage to get into the village, but their task was grim. Just trying to hang on to a few houses they'd managed to take, facing determined German counterattacks.
Well, this is happening in the village. What about the wood?
Back in the wood, the Germans kept up the pressure, counterattacks against the Welshmen, holding their positions all day long. But according to the sources, they weren't successful in dislodging them. They held on.
But the HLI in the village, their situation sounds desperate.
It was. This brings us to their tragic fate. Attempts by Hy-Vee Corps, that's a large British formation, multiple divisions to try and link up with them the next day were unsuccessful.
They could break through.
Couldn't get to them. According to the sources, the Highlanders were completely cut off, surrounded, and eventually they had to capitulate, surrender.
The numbers here, you
Yeah.
highlighted them from the source. They're just staggering.
They really are. They speak volumes about the desperation. All 80 of them. That's all that was left from an original battalion strength of over 500 men.
80 men out of over 500. That single detail just gives you such a visceral sense of the isolation, the fight, the sheer scale of loss, and just this one small part of the battle.
Absolutely encapsulates it. And that evening, the exhausted 40th Division was finally relieved by the 62nd Division, the West Riding Division.
And the cost. For the 40th Division in those 2 days, fighting just for Bourlon.
The sources state it clearly. Over 4,000 men lost. Casualties.
4,000.
Over 4,000 casualties in just 48 hours. For this single objective. It really, really puts the intensity and the cost of this fight captured in these sources into stark perspective.
Over 4,000 men in
Oh.
2 days for one objective. So despite these immense losses, despite the communication failures, the setbacks,
Yeah.
the fight for Bourlon still wasn't over, according to these sources.
No, incredibly, it wasn't. Haig, despite everything that had happened, insisted it still had to be taken. Well, the sources imply he was apparently convinced the Germans were right on the point of collapse. Maybe based on, optimistic intelligence reports.
Yeah.
Or maybe just sheer determination or pressure to achieve a decisive breakthrough.
Yeah.
He actually told General Byng, the overall commander of the Third Army, to take personal control of the battle right there.
So this leads to yet another push. The final, costly effort detailed in your sources aimed at Bourlon again. This is November 27th, 1917.
That's right. Preparation involved a heavy artillery bombardment, pounding the German lines all through the 26th, softening them up, supposedly.
And the plan for the 27th.
Kicking off early again, 06.20 hours,
Yeah.
a two-pronged assault. You had the Guards Division attacking the nearby village of Fontaine that kind of flanked Bourlon,
Okay.
and the 62nd Division attacking Bourlon Wood and village directly.
Oh, right. Let's take the Guards first. Fontaine. Who was involved?
The attack involved the 2nd Guards Brigade. Battalions like the 3rd Grenadiers, 1st Coldstream, 2nd Irish Guards. They initially advanced without tanks, which then caught up as they moved forward.
How did it go for them?
Badly, almost immediately. The sources highlight just enormous losses. They faced that devastating, enfilading fire again, this time from Bourlon Wood.
That flanking fire.
Lethal.
Incredibly lethal. And they got bogged down in brutal close quarters, house-to-house fighting in Fontaine village itself.
Just a meat grinder.
Pretty much. The situation for the Guards was described as intolerable in the reports. By 1:00 p.m., so about midday, their attack was over. Done.
Just couldn't make headway.
No. The Guards, despite, immense courage, were just overwhelmed by an entrenched enemy, probably in superior numbers, definitely in well-prepared defensive positions.
Okay, so that's Fontaine. What about the 62nd Division attacking Bourlon itself on the same day?
Well, the sources say it was, madly, much the same difficult story. Brigadier General Bradford VC, and VC stands for Victoria Cross, Britain's highest medal for gallantry.
Right, a highly decorated officer. Indeed. He ordered his 186th Brigade. This included battalions like the Duke of Wellington's Regiment, the 25th York and Lancaster, the 25th King's Own Yorkshire Light Infantry to clear the last Germans from the wood and then attack the village.
So clear the wood first. How did that go?
The Duke of Wellington's regiment pushed through the rest of the wood, actually got to the village edge, but they were stopped cold right there. Heavy German artillery fire just concentrated on the approaches to the village, pinned them down.
And the village attack itself.
That fell to the York and Lancaster and the King's Own Yorkshire Light Infantry, supported by 11 tanks from F Battalion, another tank corps unit.
And the village defenses. Had the bombardment done anything this time?
Apparently not much. The sources make a point of this, showcasing really effective German adaptation by now. The village hadn't been significantly damaged by the shelling.
So the Germans could still use all the buildings for cover.
Exactly. And they had barricaded every street, every alleyway, turned it into a fortress. And crucially, to counter the tanks specifically, they'd hidden field artillery pieces right inside the village itself.
Wow, anti-tank guns waiting in ambush among the houses.
Precisely. Zeroed in to target the approaching British armor.
So the tanks went in against that.
They did. And the cost was predictably high against such well-prepared defenses. Only 5 of the 11 tanks made it back.
Less than half.
Yeah. The attack was finally called off after just 2 hours of intense, bloody fighting. Very little ground gained.
So let's pull back a bit. What is this really detailed, source-based look at this whole struggle for Bourlon, these repeated attacks, this specific failures, the costs? Tell us about the overall outcome of this phase of Cambrai.
Well, it really confirms what the casualty figures and the sheer lack of progress suggest, doesn't it? The British forces were just worn out after days and days of these continuous, incredibly costly assaults. The line wasn't decisively broken. Haig didn't get that breakthrough, didn't achieve the sweeping victory he was clearly hoping for, the one that might have had, significant political impact back home.
And there were other pressures too.
Yeah, the sources mention broader strategic pressures, like Italy needing aid after suffering a major defeat at Caporetto. That meant British divisions might need to be diverted away from the Western Front, made a prolonged offensive here just less feasible.
So what was Haig's order then, after this final push on the 27th failed?
His subsequent order, the sources say, was basically to consolidate the line, dig in, hold the ground they had won rather than keep pushing the offensive.
Right. The big breakthrough, for now at least, was not happening.
Not happening. And
Right.
the sources do remind us, crucially, that while the British offensive phase was winding down, all was not finished at Cambrai. Not by a long shot.
Oh,
The Germans were already preparing their own major counterassault, their first really large-scale attack on the Western Front since gassing the French at Ypres back in April 1915. They were about to hit back hard.
wow. Okay. And it's worth just quickly touching on that comparison the source makes to Verdun, 1916.
Yes, absolutely. It clarifies an important strategic distinction. The German objective at Verdun, initially at least, wasn't really a breakthrough like Cambrai aimed for.
What was it then?
It was attrition, bleeding the French army white, forcing them to defend Verdun, which the Germans thought was this essential national symbol and strategically vulnerable, defend it to the point of exhausting their reserves. They only got a bit carried away later in the battle and started thinking they could actually take the city.
So a very different initial strategic goal compared to the breakthrough objective at Cambrai.
Very different, yeah.
Okay. So recapping the key insights we've pulled directly from your sources, just focusing on this fight for Berlin, we see the immense human cost, just packed into a few days of fighting.
Unbelievable cost.
We see the real challenges of trying to coordinate a new, potentially revolutionary technology, like tanks with infantry, who had basically zero experience working together.
Mm-hmm. Critical failure point.
The devastating impact of communication breakdowns in the heat and chaos of battle, like that canceled attack that went ahead anyway.
Just tragic.
And the effectiveness of a determined German defense. Once they'd recovered from the initial shock of Cambrai and adapted their tactics to counter the tanks and the British assaults,
They learned fast.
it was just a brutal attritional fight for a critical objective that, in the end, wasn't fully secured in a way that allowed for that decisive breakthrough they craved.
It really lays bare the grinding, difficult reality of the battle after that initial, almost fleeting success on day one.
Yeah. So this deep dive into the source material really leaves us with a lot to think about. What does this story of Bourlon, with its repeated, incredibly costly assaults against a determined enemy, the technical challenges of integrating new weapons, the failures in communication, and ultimately the inability to achieve that desired breakthrough? What does that tell you, the listener, about the enduring challenges of adapting tactics and strategy in the face of resilient opposition, even when you introduce potentially game-changing new tools onto the battlefield? It's a powerful question, I think, drawn right from the detailed reality captured in these specific sources.